Hello chessmates, welcome again to CC Chess Academy channel. In this video, I am going to share with you my experience and lesson learned from participating in the recently concluded International Master Roderick Nava's 100,000 subscribers celebration tournament via Lichess platform. The online open Blitz tournament was a 15-round Swiss system with a 3 minutes plus 2 seconds increment time control. It kicked off at 6 p.m. Philippine time on June 27, Sunday, while we had a small family gathering at home. In the first round, I was paired with an international master with almost 2,500 Lichess rating and who is also a member of a Philippine professional team. So I am white and my opponent was black. So I started with G3, Knight F6, Bishop G2, Fianchetto also, D3, Bishop G7, E4, D6, F4, Castle, Knight F3, preparing for kingside castling also, and then C5, transforming into what is more akin to closed Sicilian variation. Castle, Knight C6, Knight C3, and then A6, preparing for B5. H3, preventing bishop G4 and at the same time preparing for G4. Rook B8 and then G4. Knight E8, preparing more or less for F5, and then I move F5, preventing it. Knight C7, H4, B5. So this is an example of kingside versus queenside attack. The only peculiarity is that the kings are both castled on the kings in the king side. Knight E2, Knight E5, threatening my G4 G pawn at 4. So bishop H3, E6, trying to exchange at F5, Queen E1, preparing for Queen G3, and then he tried to break at the center with D5. Queen G3, exchange knight, take the knight with my rook, exchange pawn, exchange another pawn at F5, and then I took with my G pawn, and then check. F2, protecting the knight, advancing my pawn and to open his king side. Rook E1, threatening my pawn at E4. I took the pawn at G6. He took also. And then another exchange, opening also the bishops for exchange, the white bishops. So he took. And then Queen takes g6. So here, he blundered by taking my bishop because he was not able to foresee this interval move. Queen f7 check. He had no option but either h8 or h7. So queen h7, and then rook takes h3, at the same time checkmate. So this is the result of round 1. In the second round, it was a face-off with another strong member of yet another Philippine professional chess team who has almost 2,600 light chess rating. So he was white and I was black. He opened with e4, and then I moved g6, preparing to move bishop g7, fianchetto bishop, d4, bishop g7, that is the modern defense, knight f3, d6, and then c4. So leading to what we call as the Abervak system of the modern defense. Bishop g4, knight c3, knight c6. So trying to challenge his control over the d4 and e5 square, which is a hallmark of the modern defense, and in particular that of the Abervak system. Bishop e3, defending the d pawn, and then e5, finally challenging the control over the center by white. Okay, so he preferred to close the position by d5. I took first the knight. Bishop takes f3, pawn takes f3, and then I made the outpost at d4. He took it. I took also the bishop, and then knight e2, supporting the pawn with c5, and then here he moved queen a4 check. So in this position, I have two options. One is to exchange queen with queen d7. Most probably, he would take it. And the other one, which I finally preferred, is to not to exchange queen, because during that time, I believe, as also what happened was that although my king would be uncastled, his king would be more vulnerable because it is also in the center, and he would also have the dilemma and hesitation whether to castle queen side. So I move king f8, okay, trying to open up in the king side with h4. I tried to prevent it with knight f6. Okay, trying to maneuver the knight to go to the d3 or to open, and at the same time opening the bishop. Okay, knight h4, trying to control the f4 square. So knight d3, and then bishop h6, preventing white to castle queenside, and at the same time making a space for my king at g7. So he tried to open up at the queen side with b4, b6, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and then bishop, rook b1, trying to control the open file. King g7, rook b7, and then I just ignored the pawn at a7 because I also tried to take the f3 pawn. So he withdrew his his queen, queen d1, rook h to b8, trying to trade the rook and thereby controlling the open b file. Rook b3, rook b6. Okay, so finally he sacrificed the pawn so that he could also get my c pawn. I took the pawn, he took my c pawn, and then queen e7, threatening the knight, knight d3, and then I pushed. Once he would take, I would take with queen check, and then I could win the rook at h1. So queen e2, f5, bishop g2, and then rook e8. So here he preferred to exchange here, and finally to take my pawn at e4, because after the removal of the knight, my next move would be knight f4, to be followed by possibly rook takes rook, and then queen b4, assuming that the king, his queen, would withdraw to queen f1, protecting the bishop. So he took, I took, and then check. So here I have one piece extra. Rook d, king d1, exchanging knight, exchange, taking with bishop, activating his another rook. Okay, bishop d6, trying to prevent c5. Okay, trying to open up g5, activating the king, h6, king d3, rook f4, f3, activating my king, rook g3, threatening the pawn, at the same time the rook. Okay, exchanging rook. I took it, and then protecting my pawn at d4, king d2, making space for his rook. I took it, pawn takes b3, king e4, and then here it's just a matter of technique. with extra bishop. King f3, and then here I miss the better and more decisive move, king e2, thereby promoting my pawn. Threatening my pawn finally. Okay, promoting my another pawn. Pushing, protecting it with the king. Okay, preparing another pawn push. Taking it. Okay, checkmate with pawn. So that's the end of the second round.
Pinoy na talagang mahilig mag-chess. Ayan! So, mayroon pang 16 na naglalaro. Hanap tayo ng... ito, kilala ko ito. Si... Bote, nakatabla pa. Si paring Nazario, no? Losing siya ron eh. Mayroon pang isang naglalaro. Open section. So, yan, start na pala ng round number 3. Pero bago tayo sumilip mga kamatyas, syempre, silipin muna natin ang yan. Dito, Terobias, John Ray versus Malimba. Teka muna, mukhang wala na yatang queen ng black ha. Wala ng queen, ano. Winning na. Winning na ang puti, may queen eh. Okay, marami pa ring 3-pointers. Dami oh. Isa na lang ang naglalaro. Tapos na ang round number 3 at meron pang 12 rounds. Kasi ito po mga kamatyas ay 15 rounds with system. So, maglalaban-laban dito habang tumatagal. Pabigat ang laban dito mga kamatyas. Okay? So, perfect to perfect points yung labanan dito. Balik na tayo.
After another win in the third round, I was expectedly already one of the top rankings from among the 705 participants, as can be shown also in IM Nava's live streaming of the event.
Ayan, okay. Tapos na ang round number 3 pero silip muna din tayo sa...
So in the fourth round, I was paired with yet another stronger player with over 2,200 FIDE rating. He was white and I was black. He opened with e4. I played g6, preparing for bishop g7, fianchetto bishop. d4, bishop g7, approaching modern defense. Knight f3, d6, a3, a6, and then he played c4. So since he had already played h3, preventing my bishop g7, bishop g4, so here at this point I decided to transpose the game into Sicilian. More or less, it could be considered Sicilian accelerated dragon variation. So c5, and then c3. I exchange, knight d4, and at this point, I remember one of the monthly lessons of International Master Roderick Nava about the accelerated dragon. So I played Queen B6, and then at this point he played Knight B3. And also in line with that lesson of International Master Nava, I exchanged my fianchetto bishop at C3. Check. And then the exchange of the fianchetto bishop obviously is in return for a better pawn structure for me compared to his double pawn, and at the same time isolated at the C file. So knight C6, knight F6, threatening my queen, withdraw, C7, so still threatening the pawn at E4, protecting the pawn, threatening another pawn at C4, protecting the pawn at C4 and E4 at the same time, and then knight C6 with the intention of playing either knight A4 or knight A5 or knight E5, threatening the pawn at C4. Okay, so rook B1, castle, and then push trying to exchange the double pawn. So at this moment, I also remember the lecture of I am Nava. So I, instead of exchanging pawn, I pushed the pawn to D5. So by doing that, the double pawn remains at the board. Bishop E2 preparing for castling. I took it, and then he took it, which is the beginning of a blunder. And then bishop F5 winning the rook. Queen H4. Rook, bishop takes B1, castle, taking the pawn, threatening my queen, covering it, and at the same time threatening the bishop, threatening my rook. So I gave it because his next move would be queen F6. He took it. I took the bishop. He exchanged bishop. I took it, and then he checked. My king I covered with my queen. Queen A4, rook D8, rook B1, F5, driving the queen. Queen H4, rook D7, rook B6, king G7, queen A4, queen D5, king H2, taking the pawn, queen B3, advancing the pawn, and I think this is a mistake on my part. I should have protected the pawn with, let's say, knight knight A4. So rook takes B7, Queen D6 check, King H1, King F8, Queen B2, exchange rook, and then advancing my pawn at the same time protecting it. Okay, he took the pawn, advance, another pawn move, advance, he checked, check again, checked, check again, check, okay. So at this moment, I made the terrible move that I had during this tournament. Queen takes pawn, thinking that I could double check his king and queen with knight g4, only to find out that I cannot do that because of my king's location at c3. So with this blunder, I was not able to win the winning game.
May tabla ba? Dito muna tayo sa pinaka-top feature ni Liches. Si Liches kasi meron kasi siyang talagang ipapakitang board automatic yon kung sino yung nakikita niya na nasa top pa ngayon. So ito ay si Ted Ian Montoyo, ang isa sa mga pambato rin ng Kabisayaan, mga kamatyas. No? Kilala yan na si National Master Montoyo. And Malimba. Sino ba si Malimba? Malimba. Tingnan natin kung sino. CCC Chess Academy. Isa sa mga member namin ito sa monthly, no? CCC Chess Academy. Okay. Malimba. Right. Sa open category ako, coach, sabi ni Gupit Chamba. Okay yan, good. Coach, pasali naman. Ay, ngayon po pag late na sa dito, hindi na makakasali pag late na. Pero try nyo pa rin kung makaka-join kayo. Kung minsan kasi nag-a-appear yung join button, baka pwede kayong pahabulin. Ang alam ko kasi sa running time, pwede. Sa running time pwede. Makakapasok kayo anytime, makakahabol. Sarap sana sumali kasi taga Mindanao ako. Sabi ni Raymart Egg Calinos. Kung kayo umabot, kasi 6 PM tayo nagsimula eh. Usually kasi dito pagka Swiss format, kapag nasimula na ang pairing, ayaw na niya magulo, ayaw na niyang paistorbo sa kanyang automatic pairing system. Hindi na niya pinapapasok pa yung mga late na gustong sumali. Kaya gusto ni Liches pagka Swiss format, dapat on time, mga kamata. So next time, marami pa naman tayong next time. Shout out kay Nick Paniel. Coach, thanks sa live. Maraming salamat din po. Deer Hunter. Tutuwa lang po ako kasi syempre ito ay celebration tournament ng ating naabot ang 100k subscribers. Lubos na hindi makapaniwala kasi akala ko kaunti lang talaga ang chess sa Pilipinas. Kaunti lang ang chess players di ba? Yung pala ang dami pala. At ang nakakatuwa nito mga kamatyas kasi marami tayong subscribers na hindi talaga totally chess player. Sabi nila, Coach, hindi ako chess player pero naaaliw ako. Yun, maganda ron mga kamatyas. Tuwan-tuwa ako pag pinapanood kita. Nai-entertain daw sila. Ayun, nakakatuwa. Coach, next time, triple platinum play boto naman. Nakpo, ni Sir Richie Reyes. Matindi yun. Matindi yun. Hindi ko alam kung aabot dun eh. Ito nga lang 1 million subscribers eh. Sa isip-isip ko, pwede siguro pag international ang language, no, English. Kasi syempre buong mundo yun eh. Kagaya ni Legatam Chess, Agad Mator, Iniisip ko, kaya natin yon sa Pinoy lang, karamihan. Nung una, para maabot itong 100,000 subscribers, hindi nga ako makapaniwala. Ngayon, siguro, baka pwede. Baka lang baka, pero medyo matagal-tagal na panahon yun. Kailan ang sunod na sked po, Coach? Schedule, gawin po nating monthly ito, mga kamatyas. Antay lang kayo ng post namin. Pinopost namin palagi sa RNT Music and Chess Facebook page namin. Shout out to Pogi the Toy Poodle. Ayan, ang napaka-cute at napakagandang aso ni Doc Raul Meliton. Talagang ang cute-cute talaga nung kanyang bata pa eh. Oo, may damit, may sarili yatang lupat bahay yun, Doc. Nakita ko merong sariling tirahan eh, no? Ang cute naman. Sana pag napadalaw ka dito, Doc, dalhin mo yan para makahimas-himas kay cute poodle. Okay? And paano po manalo sa raffle sabi ni John Roldan Oriendo. Basta naka-register kayo sa Facebook page natin, naka-register kayo. Lahat ng mga nag-register doon, merong ang tawag dito, merong naglilista. So mamaya copy-paste ko na lang, then iroleta natin. At meron tayo nakahandang 10 winners ng merchandise t-shirts and 5 chess sets na may logo ng ating RMT Music and Chess. Okay, and YouTube. Abangan nyo po yung mamaya pagkatapos ng tournament, magra-raffle tayo. Shout out kay Eldrian Torregoza. Coach, ano standing ni Coach Rolly? Ay, hindi ko pa alam. Mamaya, makikita natin yan. Makikita naman natin yan. Nandito si Coach Rolly, naglalaro siya dito eh. Lamang ng isang pyesa ang black. Matibay din ang black. Sana all may tirahan. Ayun, sabi ni Sir Richie Reyes. Ang cute ng aso ni Doc Meliton. Talagang alagang-alaga. May damit. Talagang pinapasyal pa, no? May
sunglass.
May sunglass. Yan ang mag-aalaga ng...
May birthday nga.
May birthday celebration din, no? Pwede lang natin makausap at ma-appreciate tayo ng aso, no? Ng dog, talagang. Coach, may registration ba pag sumali sa tournament? Dito po sa atin, free. Free dito. Hanggat maaari po ang gusto kong tournament, laging free. Kasi, ito, nag-gain naman tayo ng blessing kasi naabot natin ng 100,000 subscribers. So, syempre, kailangan din nating ibahagi. Ibahagi din natin. Ganun lang naman yan eh. Happy 100 subscribers. 100k subscribers, mga sabi ni Vincent Brimbuela. Very much po. And welcome sa ating special package for you training program, si Sir Renato Liantos. Paki-comment nyo na lang po ang inyong name together with your para ma-recognize namin kayo. Screenshot. Pasok kayo mag-message kayo, mag-private message kayo sa RNT Music and Chess Facebook page. Then yung screenshot na kayo ay member dito sa ating monthly training program. Para maipasok naman kayo sa GC ng Messenger group. Okay po. Ayan. Grabe. Malupites pala to si Malimba, no? Hanggang dulo, na-maintain yung kalamangan niya ng isang pyesa at meron pa siyang very dangerous pass pawn. Nag-queen C5 kasi may matcha sa B5 no? Baka po, madadali pa eh. Coach, magkano po champion prize niyan? Ang champion prize po nito ay 10,000 pesos. Makikita nyo po ang complete details sa ating Facebook page. Nakapin din ang details. So, top 20 sa open, top 20 rin dito sa 2,000 and below category. Marami kasi tayo ng mga subscribers na request. Coach, mga mamaw. Nako, blunder yata. Hindi pwede mag-double check. Hindi pwede mag-double check kasi nakapin. Nako, nakadali pa. Nanalo pang bigla. Ang puti ay hanip, blundericious yung sacrifice. Super winning na, mga kamatyas.
After suffering from this loss, my performance drastically went down as I was also into the said family gathering. And in the end, I only won 8 games out of 15 and ranked 99 out of the 705 participants. It can also be noticed that I was one place ahead of a FIDE master who was ranked 100th. So the main lesson I have learned in this experience is that in addition to the necessary preparation for any tournament, concentration and focus of attention during the actual games is of paramount importance. If you enjoy watching this game, then click the like button. And if you want to watch other similar games with stronger players, then click the subscribe button. See you in the next video, God willing.